Hello everyone, I am Carl and I will be discussing the flower development and pollination. Here are the objectives of this topic. First is to understand how a flower develops. Second is to know how an organ develops. And third, to know how does pollination occur and the factors that may affect the mode of pollination. Flowering transition. The transition to flowering is one of the major phase changes that the plant makes during its life cycle. The transition must take place at a time that is favorable for fertilization and the formation of seeds, hence ensuring maximal reproductive success. To meet these needs, a plant is able to interpret important endogenous and environmental cues such as changes in the level of plant hormones and the seasonal temperature and photoperiod changes. Many perennial and most biennial plants require vernalization to flower. The molecular interpretation of these signals is through the transmission of a complex signal known as florigen. Vernalization is the induction of the flowering process of a plant by adaptation to the excessive cold of the winter or by an artificial counterpart. After vernalization, plants have gained the ability to bloom but may require additional season signals or weeks of development before they fully bloom. Florigen, or flowering hormone, is a hypothesized hormone-like molecule responsible for regulating and or causing plant flowering. Florigen is produced in the leaves and works in the shoot of the apical meristem of the buds and the rhizome tips. Organ development. The ABC model of flower development is a scientific model of a process by which flowering plants produce a pattern of gene expression in meristems that leads to the appearance of an organ oriented towards sexual reproduction, or a flower. There are three physiological developments that must occur in order for this to take place. First, the plant must be sexually mature. Second, the transformation of vegetative to floral meristem. And finally, the growth of the individual organs. In organ development, there are three types of amniotic genes that play major roles in contributing in the development of the organ. In the first flower whorl, only A genes are expressed, leading to the formation of sepals. In the second whorl, both A and B genes are expressed, leading to the formation of petals. In the third whorl, B and C genes interact to form stamens, and in the center of the flower, C genes alone give rise to the carpels. So what is pollination? Pollination is the transfer of pollen from a male part of a plant to a female part of a plant, later enabling fertilization and reproduction of seeds, most often by an animal or by the wind. Pollination is the movement of pollen from the anthers to the stigma. The joining of the sperm to the ovules is called fertilization. Normally, pollen is moved from one plant to another, but many plants are able to self-pollinate. The fertilized ovules produce seeds that are in the next generation. Sexual reproduction produces genetically unique offspring, allowing for adaptation. Moving on to pollination mechanism. So, pollination mechanism is employed by a plant depending on what method of pollination is utilized. Most flowers can be divided between two broad groups of pollination methods. First is entomophily, or the pollination by insects. Second is anemophily, or the pollination by wind. And in addition, there is zoophily, or the pollination by vertebrates. Entomophily, or insect pollination, is a form of pollination whereby pollen of plants, especially but not only of flowering plants, is distributed by insects. Flowers pollinated by insects typically advertise themselves with bright colors, sometimes with conspicuous patterns or honey guides, leading them to a reward of pollen and nectar. They may also have an attractive scent, which in some cases mimics insects' pheromones. Anemophily, or wind pollination, is a form of pollination whereby pollen is distributed by wind. Almost all gymnosperms are anemophilous, as are many plants in the order Polis, including grasses, sedges, and rushes. These plants produce enormous amount of pollen grains. Examples are grasses, rice, bamboo, and sugar canes. Zoopily. Zoopily is a form of pollination whereby pollen is transferred by animals, usually by invertebrates, but in some cases vertebrates. Pollination is performed by vertebrates such as birds and bats, particularly hummingbirds, sunbirds, spider hunters, honey eaters, and fruit bats. Self-pollination is when pollen from the same plant arrives at the stigma of a flower or at the ovule. There are two types of self-pollination. First is autogamy. Autogamy occurs when pollen is transferred to the stigma of the same flower. Second, geitonogamy. Pollen is transferred from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower on the same flowering plant. Cross-pollination, also called allugamy, occurs when pollen is delivered from the stamen of one flower to the stigma of a flower on another plant of the same species. Plants adapted for cross-pollination have several mechanisms to prevent self-pollination. The reproductive organs may be arranged in such a way that self-fertilization is unlikely, or the stamens and the carpels may mature at different times. The following are the attraction methods used by flowers. First, coevolution. Coevolution occurs when two or more species reciprocally affect each other's evolution through the process of natural selection. Plants cannot move from one location to another, thus many flowers have evolved to attract animals to transfer pollen between individuals in dispersed populations. Flowers that are insect pollinated are called entomopilous, literally insect-loving in Greek. They can be highly modified along with the pollinating insects by coevolution. Flowers commonly have glands called nectaries on various parts that attract animals looking for nutritious nectars. Birds and bees have color vision, enabling them to seek out colorful flowers. Flower-pollinator relationships. Many flowers have close relationships with one or a few specific pollinating organisms. Many flowers, for example, attract only one specific species of insect, and therefore rely on the insect for successful reproduction. This close relationship is often given as an example of coevolution, as the flower and the pollinator are thought to have developed together over a long period of time to match each other's needs. This close relationship compounds the negative effects of extinction. The extinction of either member in such a relationship would mean almost certain extinction of the other member as well. Last but not the least, pollen energy. From early spring to autumn, pollinating insects such as bees use the rich food resources supplied by plants in the form of nectar and pollen. Nectar is the source of energy needed for all insects' activity, while pollen is a source of building material, especially for larvae to achieve their final adult shape. That will be the end of my report. I hope you have learned something today. Thank you for listening. God bless and be safe always.